Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marchegiani here, and today's talk's going to be on brain fog and inflammation. So brain fog is one of the #1 signs of inflammation in your brain. Again, there are many different contributing causes to the inflammation, which we'll go over in a second, but if you're feeling like you're having that hard time reaching for numbers or names or speaking smoothly or fluently or trying to find your keys or just trying to remember facts, brain fog, that's telling us that there's inflammation in the brain. And it's really important to note that about half of all cells in the brain are actually immune cells. So 50% of these brain cells are known as microglial cells. And you can see 50%, so that's quite the large amount of cells in the brain that are actually immune-based. And when these cells get turned on, they have a real hard time dampening that immune response. So when that cell gets turned on, it gets faster and faster and faster and faster, creating more neuronal damage. And we're going to talk about some of the ways these cells actually get activated, because we want to do our best to dampen how these cells get turned on. So first thing is, there's a branch of certain food compounds known as excitotoxins, and this is kind of controversial. Again, a lot of the research out about excitotoxins are industry sponsored, so there's obviously a bias regarding, we don't want to produce negative studies that are going to take something off the market. But aspartame, we also have MSG and other compounds. Little known fact, when MSG is below 100%, they don't have to call it MSG. They call it something else like autolyzed yeast extract or something else, flavoring or spices. So you can get exposed to a lot of MSG and not even know it. But aspartame is still in that same family, and it's known as an excitotoxin. And literally, what excitotoxins are doing, they are activating these microglial cells. They're exciting and stimulating these microglial cells, and these microglial cells create reactive oxygen species, i.e. free radicals that continue to create damage to the brain. And they actually happen to affect the area of the brain known as the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is an area that affects learning and memory. So this is really, really important. We want to do our best to eliminate excitotoxins in our food. There's a couple of articles in the scientific literature by Dr. John Olney. Russell Blaylock also references more in his books regarding the excitotoxic activity of it. Also, aspartame, if you look at the compound, it's an amino acid called phenylalanine, also aspartic acid, and then we have about 10% methyl alcohol. So ethyl alcohol is the one we drink to get a buzz, and the methyl alcohol actually is very toxic. So there is 10% of that forming in that can add to that excitotoxic activation. Next is gluten. Gluten is one of the biggest stimulators of a leaky gut. And when we unzip the tight junctions in our gut, we unzip it and food can start going through the bloodstream or through the gastric epithelium into the bloodstream. That can heighten our immune cells. And that heightened immune cells basically can affect the astrocytes. The astrocytes, you can think of them as they line the brain. They're like the blood-brain barrier, and they line the brain. And when we basically activate those astrocytes, we start allowing gluten and the inflammatory molecules to make its way past the blood-brain barrier and create more inflammation of the brain. So we have this whole gluten, leaky guts mechanism that then breaks down our blood-brain barrier and allows more inflammation to hit the brain. So we really want to cut out various glutens, and also there's infections too that we'll talk about in a second. Low blood sugar is a big one. So when our blood sugar goes low, a lot of people just associate that with maybe potentially starvation, or in the scientific literature they talk about it with people giving themselves exogenous insulin and that dropping the blood sugar low. The problem is, most patients that I see, it's reactive hypoglycemia. So imagine their blood sugar is low, let's say right here. They eat a bolus of food that takes their blood sugar up high, and then our body reacts by pumping out a whole bunch of insulin that drops that blood sugar. So then that blood sugar drops down low, even lower than before. And then what's the first thing that people always say when you have low blood sugar? Oh, grab a candy bar, grab a thing of orange juice. And so what happens is this. We're on this vicious roller coaster of blood sugar up and down. So we go from high to low, and then the pancreas just comes and spits out a whole bunch of insulin and that insulin lowers that blood sugar. And again, what's happening? At low blood sugar, we're activating more microglial cells in the brain. We're creating more reactive oxygen species, and that's affecting the hippocampus of the brain. Also, when we go low blood sugar, that puts us in the sympathetic nervous system state. So we're also activating our amygdala as well, which is like the fight or flight center in our brain stem. So then it actually kills our appetite too. So then we're like, oh, well, I really don't feel the need to go have some protein or some fat because my appetite isn't that good. I'll reach for the candy bar instead. I think everyone knows that maybe if they got scared or they got in a fight or they saw a really violent scene on television, you may say, oh, I lost my appetite. It's because you're getting a brainstem response from your amygdala that's putting you in that fight or flight pattern. So low blood sugar. Infections. There's some research in the scientific literature, things like H. pylori and Lyme disease can actually affect, and anytime we have inflammation, we're looking at the leaky gut pathway, and that can create the leaky brain. And then in some patients, for instance, they're able to even find H. pylori and Lyme in the brain or in the nervous tissue. So we always want to make sure you're infection-free. Everyone has the right to be infection-free. And when we have prolonged leaky gut can definitely increase our chance of infections. Poor diet. Again, this is important because 70 to 80% of the solid portion of our brain is fat. So we are what we eat, right? So we have to eat the raw material so we can build our brain back up. If we're not eating our essential fat-soluble nutrients, vitamin A, D, E, and K, EPA and DHA fats from high-quality fish or cod liver oil, we're not going to have the raw material to build back our brain. Plus, fat is incredibly satiating, and it's going to have an effect on stabilizing our blood sugar. The less our blood sugar goes up and down, the less chance we have of activating our microglial cells and creating this reactive oxygen species or free radicals and creating more damage in the brain. So poor diet's really important. Not to mention things like magnesium. Magnesium is an amazing brain antioxidant. It has over 300 enzymatic roles in the body, and it's also very important for blood sugar metabolism. So you can see the mechanism with low blood sugar and magnesium and the microglial cells. Magnesium is very, very potent at squelching inflammation in the brain. Other herbs like curcumin is also very potent at bringing inflammation down in the brain. Antioxidants like resveratrol or pycnogenol, these are excellent bioflavonoids that can help dampen the inflammation in the brain. So does ginkgo biloba is another good one. Again, when it comes to these various herbs, absorption is important. If we have leaky gut and we have digestive problems, absorption may not be there. So a liposomal form can be better, and making sure the dose and the potency is perfected, because if you have low absorption, you may have to go higher just to get a therapeutic response. So I hope this kind of gave you some good information. Also, one more thing I forgot to add in here, we have to talk about hormones. Hormones are really important. When we have high levels of cortisol, prolonged levels of cortisol can actually cause damage to the hippocampus, according to Dr. Robert Sapolsky out of Stanford. So hormones are important. High levels of stress, lots of cortisol being pumped out, or cortisol dysregulation, high to low cortisols, can create damage to that hippocampal area. Also in menopause, I see this quite frequently. Menopausal women, they're primarily making more of their hormones from their adrenals. They tend to have lower estrogen. So decreased levels of estrogen. And it's not just estrogen, it's actually certain kinds of estrogen, especially estriol. And again, estriol is abbreviated E3 because the tri in there, estriol. So this is a really potent hormone. Again, you want to make sure you're lab tested for it. I can't tell you how many menopausal women I've seen where we just take a look at their hormones, we get their adrenals and their estrogen levels modulated back to just a normal level, not taking it at a very high level, just bringing it back to normal. It's amazing how brain fog clears right up. And when we do everything else in conjunction with it, we get results so much faster. So any of these topics or issues resonate with you, or you have a question about this, feel free and reach out to me below the video. And look forward to more videos coming your way very soon. Thanks. This is Dr. Justin signing off.